All right. What is happening, people? Carter here. Got another video for you. We're going to take a look at the Boker Manaro Bullseye right here. I did kind of an unboxing on it. I did a takedown video. Now I have carried this knife for a number of days, 4 or 5 days. I realize that that's not, months and months of use, but then if I carried every knife that I talked about for that long, I'd never make any videos, only a couple a year. So it is what it is, but I have put this through a lot more opening cycles and closing cycles than I think any normal knife user would do. And I did that purposely to try to accelerate my time with the knife, so to speak. I've used it for some general cutting tasks, nothing crazy, I haven't chopped anything down with it, nothing like that, but I've done a few things. Now, first off, couple things out of the way. This is a fairly new knife on the market, not a ton of reviews out there, and it's really polarized. Some people really like it, and some people are sending it back like really fast. They get it and they're like, this is junk, and sending it back. So I'm going to try to do as unbiased a review on the example I have here, but I'm sure some of these other things are going to sneak in. Second of all, it's going to be hard to review this knife because there's two ways to approach this knife. You can approach it as reviewing the knife as is. How does the grind work? How are the ergonomics and things of that nature? Or you can review it as how good of a production version of a Manaro Bullseye Custom is it? And the reason it's polarizing is people that aren't into customs, this is just a knife, and they want to know how this knife performs as is, how it feels, how it works, so on and so forth. Those that are into custom knives are curious on how good a quality of a production version is this. And they're a little less concerned about reviewing a Manaro Bullseye and more concerned with how well does this hold up against a real custom Manaro Bullseye. So I'm going to try to hit it somewhere in the middle, a few points here and there. If you want a full review of this knife, there's full custom reviews out there. And a lot of those things will ring true. So let's get going. 3.5-inch blade, 440C, multi-ground, hollow ground right here, kind of give you a little bit better cutting ability, slicing ability. It's thinner behind the edge. Here it's much thicker behind the edge because it's a flat ground blade, kind of a modified Tonto going on. And that's what this multi-grind is meant for. It gives you a really strong tip, along with a lot of thickness there and a lot of strength behind this edge so that you can use this for cutting some really gnarly stuff, prying and twisting and things like that. And then if you need to cut something a little more delicately, then you would use this grind back here. Now the downside to that, and of course I could do a whole video on compound grind blades, is you're kind of limited to ideal performance. So if you want to use this grind ideally, it really needs to be something about this wide. If you want to use this ideally, it's about that wide. If you're trying to pull cut or push cut or slice cut through something and use all of this, it's going to hold you back. You're going to hit this lip and it's not going to go through things very well. And this grind in general is just not good for through cuts. And what I mean by that is cutting through something all the way where the entire blade is moving through a substance, as opposed to cutting like, paracord or just cutting rope and things like that. So, but like I said, that's a whole nother video, but this is not ideal for certain tasks, but it is ideal for others, if that makes sense. You have a thumb disc opening. Instead of hatching on here like you would see in the custom, it is knurled, meaning they just imprint a pattern in there. Really strong aggressive jimping, almost too strong for a lot of people's taste, but it's right in line to a what the custom offers. Nice thick pivot, full titanium handle, really good milling on here, offers a lot of grip. There's a little bit of chatter in here. This is a Chinese made knife, by the way, production knife. Retails right now for about $130. I see that price going down in the future. Frame lock right there, no over travel, but it does have a lot of stiffness in the lock bar, but not overly so. But your chances of actually over traveling this knife is pretty slim. Nice deep carry, bead blasted pocket clip. The custom version would have an orange peel texture on it. This does not. Great hatching on the titanium backspacer right there. Really good work. Feels great in the hand. Ergonomics are good. It's maybe a little thin for some people, but you get used to it. The other thing that feels maybe a little off at first is this really wide finger choil. You're kind of used to your finger just fitting right in there, and you can see how big it is, but really you kind of grip the back of it, so to speak, and then it just feels really good in hand. You can see how thick that blade stock is. I think it's 0.20. Really thick blade stock, so it is pretty hefty, and most of that weight is actually the blade. That is a big chunk of steel right there. The titanium and the titanium backspacer does add weight to it. It is an all metal knife. Wanted to say steel there, but all metal knife. Most of that's in the blade. 440C, it's fine, guys. It really is. The difference between 440C and some of these other steels, 154CM and S30V, the difference is there, don't get me wrong, but I think it's overplayed a little bit. This is still more or less considered a super steel. It's kind of the first super steel. And a lot of people associate this with 440A and 440B, which you see on really cheap knives. And it's not just that 440C is a little better than A and B, it's leaps and bounds better than A and B. Now granted, that being said, you know, I want to pay for what I get, but on this knife, 440C, I believe, is fine. You are kind of sacrificing a few things with the full titanium, and more importantly, all of the milling work that's done on here. You know, there's a lot of work done on here. So you are paying for that in lesser steel, but let's keep things in perspective. This is not a death sentence. 440C is probably going to be more than adequate for most people's needs. Speaking of grinds, actually I didn't even bring that up, but the grinds are very even on both sides. You have the faux hand-finished look that looks just beautiful. I see no grind lines. Everything's finished really, really nice on here. Everything's nice and even. The secondary bevel is perfectly symmetrical on both sides. Mine came with no scratches. I did put a couple on there right here, when I put it together improperly. I scraped the inside of the scales here. Moving on with fit and finish. In my takedown video, you saw that it's unfinished on the inside of these scales. Fine. You would never notice by looking at it. You do have to take it apart to look at that. Everything else on mine is perfect. No scratches or marks. I did mention there is some, you know, some machining chatter inside here, but $130 knife, soon to probably be $100. So let's keep it in perspective there. Perfectly centered, buttery smooth. Some people complained about a sticky lock. Mine is perfect. It has just the right amount of stick that you know this lock engaged, but it is not difficult to disengage at all. My lockup is still rock solid, and I have opened this thing, I don't even know how many times. I mean, I just purposely would sit and just open this thing. I would flick it open like that. You can see how even when I do that, it sticks a little bit more, but nothing too bad. It's just been really, really good. Detent, excellent. Really couldn't ask more from the detent. Now I know some other people have gotten some examples that don't fall in line with this. This does have a very steep radius lock cutout. So it's not a matter of if it's going to develop a little bit of play or a lot of play, it's a matter of when. It will happen. So if that's something that's a huge concern to you, if you know the lock slipping is a huge concern to you, after months and months of use and maybe even years of use, then you know maybe staying clear of this would be a good idea. But if you're wanting to get a very nice looking, well done, inexpensive, full titanium production version of a custom, you know, I think you would be happy. You know, everybody's different in what they hold as being important and what they expect out of knives, but I think most people would really appreciate this knife, and I give it a thumbs up. I like it, but that's just me and my example that I have here, as well as my own biased leanings. So I'm out of here.